everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Charles Lipson, Professor Emeritus at the University of Chicago. Charles, thanks for joining me once again.
I enjoy our conversations, Brittany.
And you are coming in on the heels of some breaking news today. Hunter Biden, the president's son, was found guilty of 3 felony charges in connection to a gun that he bought in 2018. What's your reaction to the news here?
The verdict wasn't surprising. It was a slam dunk case in a couple of senses. The first is that it's a simple case to present to the jury. It's not some complicated tax or real estate or some kind of transaction like that. The second is that the evidence was overwhelming, and a lot of it was in Hunter's own words. Every defense that Hunter's attorney, Abby Lowell, who's a very smart, shrewd attorney, tough, he couldn't have had better counsel, but every defense he put forward collapsed almost immediately. So the only real defense they had was so-called jury nullification. That is, where the jury looks at the evidence and says, okay, he or she might have done it, but we just don't think it's worthy of a conviction, or we like the person, or whatever. You have those things all the time. Sometimes they happen the other way. Of course, Trump is claiming that's what happened to him in Manhattan. But it happened a lot, in racist jurisdictions in the South. In the pre-civil rights era, you would have a black person brought up, and a white jury would convict him, even though the evidence might have been thin or even invented. But in this case, the evidence was really solid, and the only chance was jury nullification, and the Biden family seemed to be going for that because they were all present in the courtroom every day, including Jill Biden flying back from France just for a day and then flying back. And it was only after the administration was kind of humiliated over who was paying for that the Biden campaign said they would finally pay for that. So I think it was a pretty open and shut case.
I want to talk about the president's reaction. Here's his initial response in part. I'm going to read it to you and then get your thoughts. Biden said this, quote, "So many families who have had loved ones battle addiction understand the feeling of pride, seeing someone you love come out the other side and be so strong and resilient in recovery. And as I also said last week, I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process as Hunter considers an appeal." What do you make of his response?
That's the perfect response. That's what the response. I always say that the president of the United States has 3 roles. He, and maybe someday she, is the head of the government. That's a political office. Is the head of state. That's something like the Queen of England. And is the head of the party, the Democratic or Republican Party. In this case, the president has a 4th role, which is he's the father. And he wants to show love for his son, but respect for the judicial decisions. I only wish he had done that in other cases. He didn't behave that way on the student loan forgiveness. The Supreme Court had really ruled in a very clear way against that. And then he said, I'm not going to let that bother me. I'm going to do it anyway. That was to send a signal. He knew that would be overturned. But I think that this statement is the perfect statement, and I'm glad he made it.
I think a lot of people feel a sort of sympathy for President Biden as being a dad in this role. Do you think, because President Biden did say he's not going to pardon his son, is there any indication if he loses the election, that pledge would change?
Well, most people don't think that a first-time felony offense like this would lead to a jail sentence, or if it did, it would be a very short one. And the political downside, not only of pardoning your son, but doing so after you said you wouldn't, would be a real problem. I think of course, you could commute the sentence if it were longer, and he has not been asked, as far as I know, and has not declared what he would do on a commutation. That doesn't erase the sentence. It says, okay, you've been sentenced to a year. We're going to let you off with time served or only a month. But the problem here isn't just that Hunter Biden bought a gun. The problem is that he left the gun open next to some drugs, apparently, in a place where children could get a hold of it. That's why it was found and then disposed of in a public place where anybody could have grabbed it. So there's some unhappy, extenuating circumstances here, but I would still be surprised if there were anything more than a modest, at most, jail sentence and probably only probation. But there's another felony tax case coming up in Los Angeles in July, and the fact that you're already a convicted felon can affect the sentencing or whatever is done there. That's a separate case. But the other point to make here, Brittany, is that Joe Biden was in no way involved in this gun case. There's no evidence that he played any role whatsoever in the case. Now, you can say that the presence of such a powerful figure is why they didn't bring the case initially. They were humiliated into bringing it. And that is an indirect role, but we don't have any fingerprints of the president on that decision.
These are charges in connection to a gun, as you said. Just hours after the verdict came out, President Biden is speaking at an Everytown gun event. And I want you to talk about the appeal for us and talk to us about how that connects to the Second Amendment.
Well, the Second Amendment is one that deeply divides the country. Not so much on constitutional interpretation, except at a very high level. If you've got friends, I live in a university community. Everybody seems to be a law professor, but and there is a little complication in the amendment because it begins with a clause about a militia being important to protect the country. Assuming away the importance of that clause, then the question becomes what kind of restrictions, if any, can be placed on the purchase of these guns. And what makes this interesting is that it's been the Democrats who've been so strong about gun regulation. And now you have the president's son who's convicted on a gun charge. I should say that the upcoming case, which we mentioned a little earlier, very briefly, the tax case, is also one that presents a kind of irony for the high tax, everybody should pay their fair share, nobody should get away party, which is the Democrats, and now you have the president's son in that. So the Supreme Court, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is the Supreme Court has not made any decisions related to restrictions like can you stop somebody who is addicted to drugs? And what does that mean? What does it mean to be addicted to drugs? There are some drugs that don't seem to be addictive, but are, or are only mildly so, but are not classified at the same high level as, say, crack cocaine. By the way, Abby Lowell's defense was kind of like that Bill Clinton. I don't know what is means. It was, okay, he's using it the day before. He's using it the day after. That doesn't mean he's on it at the time. So they may have a constitutional case here, but getting a constitutional case all the way up to the Supreme Court, that's a big deal. And, you know, it takes a long time, and they may not take it. I think there's a case coming to the court about alcoholism and gun purchases, but it'll be interesting because the Republicans will be the ones defending Hunter Biden's constitutional rights, and the Democrats will be the ones attacking his right to win on that issue on appeal.
Charles, I think that the theme of the past 2 weeks really could be no one is above the law. Donald Trump was found guilty on all of his counts. Hunter Biden found guilty on all his counts. How does this impact the election? Because they are now both convicted felons, but only one is running for president here.
You are so right. And I think, first of all, I'm always reminded that the best book about American politics, the best book about democracy, arguably, was written 2 centuries ago by a Frenchman who only spent 18 months in America, Alexis de Tocqueville. And de Tocqueville said, in America, every political argument ultimately becomes a court case. And boy, is that true. Um, I think that what's been striking, let's talk about the two cases and how they're different. The first, you pointed out the key difference, which is Trump is running for office. Hunter is not. He's not a public official, never has been, not running for office. But Trump is. But I think, first, the polling has shown no difference at all since that conviction. That's kind of surprising. But the fact that the polls don't show any difference needs to be balanced against the fact that it could be, in the last two elections, both elections have been decided by less than 100,000 votes total. And so even small differences, which you wouldn't pick up in a random sample poll of 1,200 people or 800 people or whatever, those could be important. But I think a lot of people think that the Trump conviction wasn't kosher. And it's not just the constitutional complexities of it. It's that nobody else has ever been prosecuted like this for a federal election violation based on two expired misdemeanor statutes. It looks like they went after the man, not the crime. And the fact that the person who did it ran on that makes that even more obvious. There's a constitutional question as to whether he was denied Sixth Amendment rights to know what he was being charged with. The underlying felony was never explained in court testimony or in the filing. It was partly broached in the concluding arguments, but only after the defense had rested and couldn't respond. So that's an issue. I would say that the bigger issue may relate to Hunter and the tax charges, which are coming up, because those relate to income that were part of the family operation to bring in money from foreign sources. And those didn't come from clean countries generally. They weren't coming from England and Belgium. Right? They were coming from Ukraine and China and all of these places, and they were clearly built around the centrality of Joe Biden as a key figure. So one of the issues that I'm interested in seeing is whether direct implication of Joe Biden occurs in that trial. I suspect that the federal prosecuting attorneys will be extremely reluctant to mention the sitting president, but both look tarnished still. I don't think that these issues are the big issues before the electorate. I think that the economy, inflation, open border, crime, those are dinner table, front door issues, and I think those will be the dominant ones.
Hunter Biden, as we know, is not on the ballot, but his dad is, and Donald Trump is, or will be, rather, in November. Do you think that in light of the news today, Democrats will be a little more cautious in slinging the convicted felon label at Donald Trump?
Well, the word caution has never been used about American political campaigns in the last decade. But I do think that they face a backlash if they do it, because it's not just one guy who's been convicted of a felony, it's two. But even though one is the son, and we don't visit the sins of the son upon the father, or vice versa, and which is why I thought that the tax charge is a particular issue. We'll see whether anything comes up there. Um, but I thought that the other big issue that happened today was a kind of Mitch McConnell moment for the president of the United States. I've seen video where the president froze, like Mitch McConnell did. You'll remember whatever it was a year and a half ago, when Mitch McConnell was in the middle of saying something and just stopped and stood there for a while. The president looked like he completely froze while everybody else around him was dancing as this Juneteenth celebration, the freeing of the slaves. And I think that the issue of the president's cognitive capacity is becoming more and more on people's minds. And part of the reason is that people have no confidence in President Biden's vice president as someone they really would like to see as president if necessary. So, but if you remove Kamala Harris from the ticket, you almost certainly alienate a crucial constituency of the Democratic Party, which is black women. They just count on them as in a huge way. They wouldn't vote for Trump, but they don't have to come out at all. Trump is making inroads some among black men, but black women have been solid for Biden, and he just couldn't remove it. So I would say it's still quite likely that Biden will be the nominee, but we've got also a debate coming up, and that presents potential risks for both candidates, but I would say the risks are greater for Biden, which is why an incumbent president would allow an early debate like this. Normally, he's in the driver's seat and he would wait, but 538 website is now saying his polling is under 40%. That's really dangerous territory.
Do you think that there's an early debate, so it's baked in, so it's less of maybe a closer to debate surprise?
Well, yes, that could be. It's also the case that we now have so much early voting. I mean, it's not happening in July, or late June, but we do. There was something kind of wonderful about going on election day and voting with everybody else. In my precinct on the south side of Chicago, even though last time my wife and I voted a day early, it was like election day. They were just, the place was full, and it's kind of exciting to be there with your fellow citizens as we all vote. But now, with everybody mailing in their ballots and so forth, that's one thing. I hadn't thought about your point, but I think it's a very good one, Brittany, that if you fear you might not do well in the debate, maybe it's a good idea to get it out of the way early.
Well, that could be baked in. Two things definitely are going to be baked in: the Trump verdict and then this Hunter Biden verdict. But as you mentioned, he's going to trial for 9 tax crimes in September. That's 2 months before Election Day. So how do you think that's going to impact President Biden politically, if at all? Any impact on the election?
It doesn't look good when your family members are constantly in court. But I think the crucial issue will be whether or not a lot of this looks like a family grift, or whether it looks like Hunter is doing things on his own. If it looks like the money is coming in because of his political connections, it becomes harder and harder for the president to give the Hogan's Heroes answer: I know nothing, I have no idea what's going on. It just becomes less and less credible. But as I say, there are other big issues, far bigger ones, in my opinion: the economy, inflation, border security. And there will be likely riots this summer at the conventions. And my general view on that, Brittany, is that disorder hurts the party in power, because the party in power is the one that is responsible for maintaining civic order. And the fact that the Milwaukee, which is where the Republican convention will be, and Chicago, where the Democratic convention will be, are both Democratic um, cities in Democratic states, albeit in Wisconsin's case, a very purple state that's up in the air for the current election. But if there's disorder there, that will really hurt Biden, uh, and it'll hurt Biden more than Trump.
Well, you're in Chicago, so hopefully we get a firsthand account from you as to what's on the ground there this summer. But I am sure you and I will be talking before then. Charles Lipson, thank you so much for joining me.
It's such a pleasure, Brittany, and I hope this firsthand account of rioting doesn't happen real close to my house.
No, of course not. Oh God, no, no, no. Of course not. Hopefully far, far away, or hopefully not at all.
Thank you. It's great to see you, Brittany.